conversation. Um, so first and foremost, thank you for lending your time today. I know like we're technically on break, right? I think
Yeah,
us
kind of, yeah.
I know I'm still in the throes of turning grades in, but like I'm pretty much finished, and I would imagine that your clock is in a similar position.
hmm
So I know what it means to slam the computer shut and kind of not want to open that thing back up. So, like I said, thank you for taking the time today to have this conversation, and I'm excited. I'm excited because it's been a while since we've actually chatted. I think last time we actually talked was what ICA, I want to say might have been
I think
like
it was Air in Philly.
here. Yeah,
Right?
that's possibly what it was.
Yeah.
But since then, right, we've had a lot of different things go on, A, with this administration, but B, in terms of folks who are thinking about digital spaces and black digital
hmm
futures and digital power and digital feminism, all of these digitals, right?
Yeah.
Where do you sit now with, TikTok and that proposed ban that was, in the headlines before and it's now like back somewhat in the headlines. And how do
hmm
you see this moment sort of shaping Black digital culture, especially given how much, we've relied upon talking about how Black creators have built out a lot of platforms, language, humor, and aesthetics? You as someone who studies what you study, what are you seeing and what are you thinking about in terms of this whole TikTok ban and data breaches and things of that nature that have been sort of in conversation in the news since we last talked?
Yeah, I mean, my research is thinking about, or what I've been thinking about lately is just what are they doing? You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
everybody knows that like the TikTok ban is a lot of smoke and mirrors, but it's like
Yeah.
smoke and mirrors for what? I love that moment when, they had that alert like, oh, the ban is down, but Trump is working hard to get it back up. And, all this, xenophobic rhetoric about it being a Chinese company and
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I'm like, the real problem is the rest of the apps that are run by Silicon Valley because they're
Mm.
doing some weird stuff over there.
Mm.
I've been really thinking about this moment that comes up in the Careless People memoir. It's supposed to be an expose, but
Okay.
if you're a social media researcher, it's not saying anything new. But
Okay.
there's a moment in the book where the author talks about Mark Zuckerberg discovering how he had an impact on the 2016 election, right?
Mm.
Because of course, when he was accused of this, accused of using the data and the marketing, like he was just like, but we didn't do that. We didn't intentionally do that. And she talks, there's a scene where they're on the plane and they're
Mhm.
explaining to Mark how like these companies like Cambridge Analytica, whoever it was, just weaponized buying ads. They're like, we didn't co-conspire with them. We weren't like
Yeah.
in on it, but this is how they weaponized it. And his response to that in this book, allegedly, we'll keep saying allegedly, is that he said, maybe I should run for president. And I'm like, oh wow, this is really interesting to think about how these Silicon Valley people are thinking about power. And
Mm.
as they're discovering what these social media platforms can do in terms of like algorithmic amplification of certain ideas, coercion, they're not saying let's regulate it or whatever. Of course they're not. They're saying how can we manipulate it?
Mm.
So when I think about something like the TikTok ban, I'm going, okay, y'all want to control TikTok now? Why? What y'all want to do? What y'all want to put that in there? Put in the app. But then also specifically, I'm like, how is this going to impact Black folks?
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of conversation. We hear a lot of conversations about how Black culture is being mined, repackaged,
Mhm.
exploited, but we're not seeing a lot of conversation about how these tools are influencing how Black people think about politics,
Mm.
how we think about each other, how we think about community, even though we know those effects are there. We know
Mhm.
that everybody keeps arguing on the internet about $200 dates and all these things that don't matter, and what is Megan Thee Stallion doing with her body today? And in many ways, these are conversations that have always existed in offline contexts.
Yeah.
They're not new to the internet, but they're being weaponized in another way to like, mainstream certain political ideologies. So we see a lot of Black folks We know Black folks have always been conservative. We're not going to act like we haven't been, but
Hmm.
it's this feeling of it's getting worse, or like there's
Yeah.
more disunity amongst Black folks. And so I'm just really thinking about that. Like, how is all of this smoke and mirrors around Silicon Valley actually impacting us culturally? Because it's not enough people talking about us. We'll have a lot of conversations about Andrew Tate, but not as much conversations about what's going on in, with the Fresh and Fit podcast, or Kevin Samuels. He's gone to the other side, but his impact is still reverberating. So, where are those conversations? And so that's kind of where my research is centered right now.
Mm. I mean, I know for a time we've been talking about like algorithmic power, and even now more so, we're moving into the space of artificial intelligence being
Hmm.
central to a lot of conversations about how we spread information or spread knowledge. I guess very similarly, what should Black folk be worried about in this moment of AI? I sat on a panel for this magazine, Black Parenting magazine, and I was asked, like, all right, well, you're a parent, and like, what are the things that you're worried about with your own son, and dealing with artificial intelligence? And where, as a parent, should they start in terms of trying to talk to their children? And I was explaining, I was like, well, you know what? This is the wild, wild west.
Hmm.
And like, I feel like we're still we're 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 building the plane as we're flying the plane. And I think the conversation has been very, at least in circles around me, it's been very much centered on, you know, I guess whether young people are going to retain certain literacy skills,
Hmm.
but identity shows up in these tools as well. And I think maybe that conversation hasn't been central. But what are some of the things that you're thinking about in this age of AI that sort of also intersect with some of the things you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get, y'all, I'm originally from California, so sometimes I get a little woo-woo, you know what I mean? A little spiritual, but we're also having a conversation about Black people, and I think about Black folks as inherently very spiritual. And
Hmm.
so when I think about what's happening in terms of artificial algorithmic amplification, I'm thinking about spiritual warfare, maybe
Mm.
not in the Christian context, but in the context of like, if people are have a way that they can control how we think about politics, how we think about empathy, love, and care, that is a very powerful tool. And
Yeah.
so when we think about how we need to be approaching this era, we need to be thinking about protecting our minds and our spirits. Like we need to
Mm.
be thinking about political education
Mm.
and spiritual warfare. And I say that I always think about my father, rest in peace, when I have these conversations, because when I was a kid, he was a, Black man from Waycross, Georgia, had no capacity to go to college or do anything like that, no money. He was super smart but couldn't go. And so he
Yeah.
really poured it to his children to be like, y'all, I never had these opportunities. You have them. One
Hmm.
thing he always said to me was like, there is one thing that they can't take from you, and it's your education.
Yeah.
So you get as smart as you possibly can, you learn as much as you can. That is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. And now I'm entering this era of AI. I was like, oh wow, they can actually take what you know, because right now our
Hmm.
children are being marketed these really easy fixes
Yeah.
and this false notion that the computer thinks and reasons better than us,
Yeah.
even though we know AI for, AI is a catch-all phrase. Usually when we're talking about AI, we're talking about large language modeling system, which is
Hmm.
literally just a mimic machine. It's mimicking thinkers, right?
Yes.
So in this moment, I'm like, we got to be thinkers, because if we're
Yeah.
not thinkers, we're just going to be following the algorithm. So
Hmm.
I think a lot about political education, things that we've always needed in pre-digital context, but they're becoming ever more important. Even my non-Black students, I talked to them about this. I was like, you're going to be able to edge out your peers
Hmm.
in any workplace because you can think. Do not
Hmm.
offload your thinking to these large language modeling systems. But we're seeing that. I'm already seeing people like, oh, I just chat GPT'd it. You don't have to
Yeah.
chat GPT an email.
Yep.
That the practice of writing that email is keeping your tools sharp. Right. So I'm always thinking about keeping my tools sharp the same
Yeah.
way, the fitness influencers are like, we got to get in the gym. We got to be ready just in case. I'm
Yep.
like, I got to do the same thing with my brain. I got to read a book. I got to write. I got to touch grass. You know what
Mm,
I'm saying? I got to do things offline because this AI thing, it's on the one hand, it's supposed to make things simple, but I
mhm,
think it's very misguided and misplaced, and we're walking into it's like the F around and find out phase. Like we're about to find out that this doesn't actually work, especially when the large language modeling system is now using itself to reflect itself, and then it becomes derivative and it's pushing out spaghetti. As professors, we're already seeing the nonsense the
mhm,
large language modeling systems
mhm,
are pushing out. It's only going to get worse. So I'm just thinking about how people should just be preparing themselves for that moment, because I think the future is not AI. The future is actually going to be organic intellectuals and people who know
mhm.
how to reason and read and people who have skills. Um, Sorry, I know I'm going long, but there was an article that
No.
came out recently, and I wish I knew which publication it was in. And they were talking about how like they're trying to create an like one goal might be to create an intellectual class. Like I think there's a pushback on how are all these black people in all these jobs with these salaries
Mhm.
living in these communities? You know, capitalism needs somebody at the bottom in order for the top to work. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are looking at all of the racial progress, the class progress that black folks and other minoritized groups have made.
Mm,
And they're going, we need to push back on that. No more student
mm,
loans. Y'all don't need to be going to nursing school and medical school. Like we need y'all to chill because it's upsetting the disorder. And so you have to think about that because like, you know, if that's the goal, then that means that that is why they're kind of curtailing some of this access to education. I think it's just
mhm.
going to be this, we're going to have a smaller elite class of thinkers, and we need to
Yeah.
be a part of that. So we have to resist over relying on AI because some of them are going to do it. Whoever them is, I don't know. I'm saying
Yeah.
them. I don't know. It's a lot of people, but I'm just saying us. You know, watching this podcast or listening to
Yeah.
this podcast or watching it, we're going to be the thinkers, and we're going to
Yeah.
actually do that difficult work.
I literally, I want to say when was Afrotech? I was at Afrotech in the beginning of November, I think, when I was in
Oh, this past
Houston.
year. Okay.
And and I listened to four or five different, big lightning talks, one by the president of Microsoft AI,
Mm-hmm.
another by it wasn't even Reid Hoffman. It was Reid Hoffman's artificial intelligence, Reid AI, who gave a
Mm-hmm.
talk based on a language model built on whatever Reid Hoffman's previous speeches and things that he's inputted in from interviews or whatever. Then Stacey Abrams talked, and then there were two other individuals who got on stage and talked. And Jadena, the artist, musician, and I'm trying to remember the last person. This was all in the course of like maybe 4 hours. Baratunde.
Oh, okay.
And I just there was like this tale of two cities. Like there's these people who were talking about this is going to democratize everything, and you'll be able to learn
Mm-hmm.
so much easier, so much faster, so much better. Um, and then there's this other side where they're like, we're going to lose connectivity, the connective tissue of humanity to even the thing that this thing draws upon, which is, real people doing real thinking and real work. If no one is continuing to create new things, then it's
Yeah.
not going to have anything to draw upon. Um, but I just thought it was so interesting that it was so stark. Uh,
Yeah.
we're going to like an Amazon party when they just fired thousands of people, and like these sorts of things made me wonder if maybe Black folk are sort of walking around with the wool over their eyes a little bit to how these tools will be deployed in the future. I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, like, do you think that there is a balance between these two sides? Like, is there an aspect to AI that you think can deliver on some of these promises of democratization, or is this something where we're sort of being hoodwinked?
Yeah, I think AI is a tool just like any other tool. It's also not
Hmm.
even new. Like a lot of the
Right.
large language modeling technology that we're looking at is started with Google. We've been using Google
Hmm.
search forever.
Hmm.
That's the reason why Google was able to come up with their little AI generated answers so quickly. Like
Yeah.
now, if you haven't opted out, it comes up at the top of Google now.
Yeah.
Because we've been developing these tools for a long time. So, on the question of like whether or not we're being hoodwinked, I feel like it's what you said. Like there's two camps. Like I feel like
Hmm.
it's in Silicon Valley, in the country, within Black folks, within other subcultural groups, there's like the techno pessimist and the techno optimist.
Hmm.
I often get pegged as a techno pessimist because I harp a lot on the negatives because I don't
Hmm.
think we talk about those enough. And we
Hmm.
don't talk about the fact that the tech optimists are like really caught up in they're like PR. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm watching the smoke and mirrors of it all, but I think like the best balance of it does exist, and I think that is in with the techno skepticism, and I
Mm.
think techno skepticism might inherently be black.
Hmm.
I know you know the edited volume that Disco Network put out this
Yeah.
past year. I think is really good in terms of thinking about techno skepticism because
Mm.
they say in there it's actually this position where it's like we're recognizing that there are things that we can do with the tools, but what are the things you're trying to do with the tools? Like if you're using AI to offload your thinking,
Hmm.
that's not what we should be using it for. Like, you know what I mean? Like if we're actually still developing our thoughts and things like that, and we use it as a tool to assist us to amplify what we already know, that's
Hmm.
great. But that's not how the majority of people, especially not our college students, are employing a lot of these large language modeling systems. But I like the concept of techno skepticism, especially the way that it's articulated in that particular book, because it's rooted in kind of like black. I mean, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like black skepticism. Like black folks are
Hmm.
like, oh, you got a little machine that's gonna
Hmm.
write my paper for me. I'm not trusting that. Y'all probably sending all my data to the government. Like we are inherently conspiratorial and skeptical for good reason, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a history of us knowing we know how these systems work. We see them better than the people that created them, right? A
Yeah.
lot of the times. So I want to say that Black folks are more skeptical of these tools,
Hmm.
but I'm watching people, line up and go to places like I'm gonna say Afropunk, Afrotech, and they
Hmm.
don't have a critical lens. They are just there because they want to make a lot of money. They've bought
Yeah.
into, that system.
Yeah.
So I think just like other groups, there's two camps, but I do think there's something uniquely special about the
Hmm.
skeptics within our ranks because we know that like this is a tool, it could be good, but if history shows
Yeah.
these tools have always been used and weaponized against us. And I think about something as small as I'm in Inglewood, California right now, which is my hometown. It's
Okay.
being gentrified like crazy. If you watch sports, this is where SoFi is, and
Yeah.
historically where the Lakers used to play, but now we're
Yeah.
downtown at Staples. But
Hmm.
they've gentrified the heck out of Inglewood. There's electronic billboards everywhere. And something that's very striking is that there's Waymos everywhere. You know what a Waymo is?
Those are those self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars. So
Yeah.
I first started seeing them about 4 years ago in the Bay Area, but then like about a year, maybe two ago, they started hitting here. And they're all over LA, but they are concentrated in Inglewood. And I
Hmm.
kept going, what is this about? And then I learned that like Waymos as a way to try to like popularize themselves, because people are, again, Black people are like a driverless car. No, I'm not getting in that, which a lot of people feel that way too, right? But the way that they've been able to stay afloat and also try to like market themselves as safe or whatever is that they're undercutting Uber. So, for instance, I needed a Uber from SoFi the other day. There was not even a game happening. I just was over there because they have like really good sports bars. I think I was at the gym. $100 to get 2 miles, 3 miles. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. So out of curiosity, I looked up Waymo, $15. I was like, oh, okay. So now I'm understanding why there's so many in this neighborhood because, there's people with less, income. So it's like they're more likely to use them. And so it was just a reminder that so many of these tools get deployed within our communities, right? And so we have to be aware of like why there's a vision, there's a rhetoric of how we talk about, oh, the Waymos are going to disrupt the Uber industry and they're going to be so cool because they're driverless. That's actually not cool. That's actually technology none of us really needs. And they're now selling it to us by just undercutting the cost of Uber. And it's just like, I don't know, I'm rambling, but we need to start thinking about like, why are these technologies being tested among us? And I think we innately ask those questions because I got here and I was like, I don't see as many Waymos on the rest of the town as I see in Inglewood. What is going on? And that made me go back and figure out what was going on. And I think there's something very innate in us where we ask more questions than other
Mhm.
people will ask?
No, that is true. I mean, I in turn just in even not to totally pivot, but I've been thinking about like a um black digital feminism and
Mm-hmm.
also black queer voices as having been, I guess, in some ways, some of the unsung heroes of like I guess what we would call Web 2.0. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what
Mm-hmm.
iteration we're in now. We might be moving towards Web 4.0, I guess now. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I guess I'm wondering, um, in the midst of all of this, even when we're saying black folk right now, sometimes I'm thinking of black women and black queer folks more so than I'm thinking of black men in terms of how, online discourse has been shaped for over about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess I'm wondering, do you see opportunity for Black digital feminism to reemerge as it has time and time again in 2025, 2026, 2027 as one of
Mm-hmm.
these sort of I guess one of these I guess power sources to sort of uh bring things back to square.
Mm-hmm.
Are there going to be some of these instances like what we saw with Me Too, what we saw with Black Lives Matter, what we've seen with even the memification of culture and certain things, how things get communicated, how we sort of figure out ways to sort of navigate around recommender systems that don't think about us the way that that we want to be considered. This idea of hyper invisibility that kind of has been floated around, I guess our discipline for a while. I guess I'm wondering in the age of AI and even with, self-driving cars and all of these different things going on in the world, where do you see Black digital feminism fitting into this evolution?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to resist being negative right now because I'm seeing some really cool I'm seeing really cool projects. I mean, my research centers on like how like the discourse of like
Yeah.
Black feminism is taken up in social media spaces, and it's like not good. It's really not
Hmm.
good, and
Hmm.
it really has to do with offline reasons of people not reading. Like these
Hmm.
notions of feminism is tearing up the Black community, feminism is bad. These are old notions, and they come from people who don't read feminism, right? Like
Hmm.
they don't actually understand what feminist literature is saying. They're listening to other people tell them what it's saying and then getting angry about it. They're not actually identifying how feminism can be weaponized as a scapegoat or for capitalism's problems or patriarchy's
Hmm.
problems. And so I don't necessarily see that get any better because, like I said, Silicon Valley tech bros have identified that they have the power to increase those negative perspectives and instead of responding in a way that I would love them to, and let's make a social media space where we don't get more of that, they're actually leaning into it. We need more of that. That's how we
Hmm.
kind of like, reinforce our own power. But at the same time, of course, Black feminist thinking, qu queer folks and queer theory, the way that people think about the world, that's not dying, because those people are still reading, those people are
Hmm.
still working, those people are still organizing, those people are invested in a different way. And there's a lot of interventions that are coming up as a result. And I'm thinking right now about Amar AJ has
Yes.
the project coming out of Harvard right now with the decentralized social media, and
Yes.
it's a way of reimagining social media spaces so that it is safe for people from traditionally marginalized backgrounds.
Hmm.
It helps folks to connect better and to organize. And so I think the future is female, the future is queer, the future is also offline, but
Hmm.
maybe offline looks differently than I'm imagining it. Maybe we're still using digital tools, but we figured out how to take out the profit
Mm.
model, the profit margin, and thinking about decentralized networks in the way that I think AJ is going by a Scoffrey now. His last
Yeah,
name is a Scoffrey. I was going to
yeah,
say Christian, and then I'm like, no,
mhm,
it's Scoffrey.
yeah.
But projects like that are giving me hope, and they remind me that, people who are thinking along the lines of Black feminism, queer theory, we're always thinking outside of the box, which
Hmm.
gives us an edge, right? Because we're not looking at, oh, AI is the future. We're looking past the smoke and mirrors to say, okay, let's set ourselves up for this point in time where people have offloaded all their thinking to AI and they are totally invested in it. Like, how are we going to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and our people? So I think, like, we're always a couple steps ahead.
Hmm. That's real. That's real. I have two questions left, and one is kind of, I guess I don't want to keep moving in the space of being talking about things that are pessimistic or things that are that could take us into a sad or a dark place. But I want to ask you, just because we're in this moment in this particular time, a pop culture question about the Diddy documentary that recently has come out on Netflix that was produced by
Yeah.
50 Cent
Oof.
and directed by Alex Stapleton. And like, I know this is a
Hmm.
complete pivot from talking about the research that we do, but I just felt like it was an opportune time, to bring up something that is kind of in the zeitgeist as we speak. Um, I guess I'm wondering, from your point of view, what does this sort of public reckoning about Diddy? It's raised like a lot of questions about power, masculinity, exploitation, particularly
Does it?
in hip
Does
hop,
it?
a little bit. But
Okay.
what do you think is this documentary doing, in terms of bringing to bear like what some saw as cultural nostalgia and now what I guess some would call accountability, and I guess from a more just, I guess, from a more just a media consumer standpoint, have you watched the doc and what did you
Oh
think?
yeah,
Okay.
of course. I watched it. I think the day it came out, I think I popped it in and I was watching it till 3 o'clock in the morning because I was just like, oh, this is so good. I'm a movie girly, I'm a documentary girly. So I love a good, expose. And I was one of those people that have followed the Diddy trial pretty closely. Like I was
Hmm.
watching the YouTube
Yeah.
wrap-ups of people saying what happened in court that day. And honestly, like uh, I have so many thoughts about this because while the documentary was really, really good, and I strongly suspect that there's a part two coming just because there's just so
Yeah.
many things that didn't get discussed, it makes me sad because I feel like what was missed was like the critical conversation
Hmm.
because a lot of people walked away from this just going, Diddy is evil
Right.
and not really understanding the mechanisms of power at play. Like clearly he is probably unwell in some particular ways, but like there's no conversation to see us through that. We go through this scapegoat again of this person is bad,
Hmm.
therefore they should be shunned, as opposed to like talking about the mechanisms of power. And I feel like that came up even in the Diddy case with people having no sympathy for his victims and
Right.
then also his victims not all being victims. At least one person who
Mm.
testified was clearly, a sex worker who had some agency, who was feigning like she kind of didn't know what was going on. I don't want to get too deep into that, but thinking specifically about Cassie,
Hmm.
Cassie is a 19-year-old girl who is having her whole career dangled in front of her face.
Yeah.
And, we don't, we get this like kind of like binary thinking of either she's innocent or she's guilty, or and then we got more so people saying she should have known better
Right.
without a critical conversation about how power works. There's an uneven power dynamic. This is this man who is a billionaire with all this money dangling this stuff in front of her. He's doing what I'm from Inglewood, California. I'm very familiar with pimping. I know Romeo pimping. We pretend to be boyfriend and girlfriend so I can get you to do things.
Yeah.
Cassie clearly didn't know. She wasn't familiar with that.
Mm,
And I'm not ever going to blame somebody for what they don't know, but it
right.
was really hard to watch so many people attack her in that same way. And again, I'm going to say this very carefully because I don't want to oversympathize with Diddy, but a
Hmm.
lot of times these people that we are villainized are also victims as well.
Yeah.
Diddy got some problems. R. Kelly has some problems.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby has some problems. And like the larger overarching issue is that patriarchy is not serving anybody. It's not serving women,
Mm,
children. It's not serving men. And
mm,
so we're not having this larger conversation about care. And then it becomes a us versus them. They're stupid. They're dumb. They're
mm.
evil. And it's just so base level binary. I want to have a larger conversation about harm, about power,
Yeah.
about how, you know, Diddy becomes Diddy. And I don't want to put him off the hook. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like he's still engaged in these things. He's a grown ass man. But I want us to be able to understand how systems of abuse work, right? And the documentary serves to lay everything out and get people to kind of see the harm he's done, but it
Hmm.
doesn't give an explanation of how power and abuse works. And that's what I would have wanted. I would have
Yeah.
wanted the mainstream conversation to have a lot more depth in, oh, look at, you know, 50 Cent. He's such a bully, you know? And because we gotta remember 50 Cent ain't innocent. Like 50
No,
Cent got some issues too. So he better pipe down for somebody to do a documentary on him. You know,
it's
Ja
a
Rule made
lot.
that joke that he was gonna do that, but that's a real thing because in that industry, there's so much that happens there. You know, I'm a former journalist. I used to work at Double
Hmm.
XL.
Hmm.
So I had a firsthand account of being in those spaces and
Yep.
understanding
Yep.
that if you don't have a grounding, if you're not street smart, if you're it like it all types of things can happen to you.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
not trying to blame victims, but I've just seen a lot of things, you know?
Right. No.
Um, but rationale kind of goes out of the window when money gets in the room and people have, you know, have dreams of a life of having a career. So I'm rambling, but I have a lot of thoughts about that documentary. I just want us to have deeper conversations about what we
Mm.
saw.
Yeah. Yeah. No, to your point, I mean, clearly I worked in music as well, on the end of trying
Yeah.
to, trying to be that artist, right?
Yeah.
And I had, I want to say maybe a different corner of the industry than the one that Diddy was in, but I looked at it too with the whole like Russell Simmons,
Mm-hmm.
Andre Harrell, Diddy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like a grooming that
Mm-hmm.
happens on the way down. Harrell was an artist for Def Jam. He learns the game from Russell Simmons. A lot of that
Mm-hmm.
gets passed down to him. Andre Harrell very similarly passes a lot of his practices and processes down to Diddy, down to the way that they dealt with women, the way they dealt with, subordinates, the way they signed artists, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, there's also this kind of rites of passage thing that occurs in the music industry that yeah, for in many ways, I won't get too far into my own career, but like I was signed by John Monopoly, who was under Chris Lighty, and it's like that was
Mm-hmm.
another tree. It's like you learn from, the Chris Lightys and Mona Scotts of the world, and they talk,
Yeah.
and so and like these trees again are still very as much as there was a lot to admire about the lifestyle and the things that can be afforded to you if you do maneuver the space well. There's a lot of folks who get lost in the wake. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who I met who had 3 and 4 deals and never got to certain places or had different publishing deals, and you wonder what happened to such and such, and they just don't see them again. And then you hear these stories later on about how they got caught up in one way or another in one of these sort of relationships or interactions where either they got blackballed or they got kind of figuratively and literally in bed with the wrong person. And it's an interesting thing. I think it's one of the reasons why academia doesn't necessarily phase me in so many
Yeah.
ways. But I think as someone who grew up in a certain time period where Diddy, to many in my peer group, was a hero. We didn't know all of the things that were going on behind closed doors, but we knew he's driving Bentleys and he's wearing, the jewelry, and he's running companies, and he's sort of giving us this mogul image that I guess in hindsight we were sort of looking at. He was getting away with it in plain sight what he was doing. But
Mhm.
I'm also just wondering. I guess it's so apropos because you having a journalistic background. It's like I wondered just what was going through your mind when you watched it and sort of what came back. But I do think that there's more to come. I was surprised that they were able to get that sort of secret footage that I imagine was supposed to be for maybe a Diddy produced documentary that possibly would show his reincarnation to a degree, and it ends up showing something completely different.
Yeah,
We're seeing the background of him going through Harlem, trying to kind of get his street credibility back up and be a man of the people, and we're seeing him, make real comments about telling his lawyers or how they can fix this narrative and like stuff
yeah.
that
And
really resonated.
he said, we gotta tell them what to think. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important. I think so much about, I mean, communication as a field was started to figure out how to do basically predictive analytics. We get
Mhm.
Paul Com because they're trying to figure out how to shape political messaging. It's
Yeah.
health com because they're trying to figure out how to shape health. Like it's propaganda, essentially, like studying how ideas travel and ideas flow. And so
Hmm.
it's really interesting to think about people who work in entertainment and marketing because a lot of them have a better grasp on that it's that simple. Like a
Yeah.
lot of media is about selling an idea. And I think that was one of the big things that I got out the documentary too, is just thinking about how Diddy leveraged tragedy to like, promote his
Mm-hmm.
career. Like that those people died and he's like, that's
Hmm.
how dope my events are. People are dying. It's like, ooh, that's kind of dark. Or also, I was one of those kids, I was locked in that I think it was MTV Awards, I can't remember, but when they did that
Hmm.
tribute to Biggie and he's in
Yeah.
that white suit, everybody's memeing it now of him
Dancing.
dancing and laughing. But that was a hard, I might have shed a tear as a child. Like it
Yeah.
was tragic growing up on the West Coast, having Tupac already having this happen, and then
Hmm.
seeing Biggie die, and then really thinking these dudes are friends. He's been hit, and
Yeah.
then just to find out that he used it as a spectacle to launch his career and in that No Way album, which I own. Why do I own a
Yeah.
Diddy album? But it's like that's how good the marketing was. And so I'm always enamored by those people who have a keen sense of, because I don't think he's like, I don't know, people love billionaires. I've never grown up to worship billionaires. Like
Hmm.
I learned that like, it would be difficult to get into heaven if were a billionaire. That was a mantra in my household. But these people like Diddy may not have any like musical talent or whatever, but like these people who have this like keen sensibility around how to control and manipulate situations, it's just fascinating and interesting to me because I don't think we talk about we don't have a language or we do, but like popular culture doesn't have a language to talk through what those people are doing. We go back, we call them a mogul, we call them a businessman. And it's
Hmm.
like, this man is a master manipulator. Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of what came out of the documentary. And that's maybe how we should have always read it, but we didn't have the know-how and the language to
Mm.
talk through what he was actually doing. Even as, a decade ago, things were coming about how he exploited all his artists, and the people who
Hmm.
were speaking against him from Mace to 112 to Total to
Oh
everybody.
yeah.
We still showed up. I mean, I'm gonna speak for myself. I still showed up to the Bad Boy reunion tour
Lost
because I was
that.
like, well, at least they'll get a check. And I just sat there, can't you see? I was totally in it. So I'm not even trying to, elevate myself
For
above
sure.
other folks, but I just in these moments, as a calm journalism scholar, I think about storytelling and narrative in just different ways. And so the Diddy thing is just really got me thinking about how he sold us something.
Yeah. Yeah. And continually was able to do so. I mean, there's still folks who haven't completely counted him out yet. They're like,
Yeah.
that they feel like he will figure out a way to sort of move forward once he is released.
He might.
Um,
He's gonna
and
have a rebrand. He invented the remix allegedly. By the way, controversial opinion. Let me go on record and say this right now. Why does Diddy get to say invented the remix when West Coast artists were already digging in the crates, mixing the
Mhm.
Midwest kind of funk, G-funk. G-funk is the
It is
remix,
the
you know?
remix.
And I'm not saying that whatever Diddy was doing on the West Coast wasn't good because I was loving Juicy and all that, but I'm like, that come from the West Coast. You can't really take that from us. I'm putting that on record right now. Like, why do we say maybe they're saying he invented the remix in terms of like putting an R&B artist
Industry
on a rap
standard.
song?
Yeah, like
Like, I don't know, but doing the G-funk, he literally made G-funk East Coast. Like,
yeah, yeah.
just saying.
The documentary talks about that too, though,
Yeah.
how he like really, as much as he was, positioned as like an adversary, he was a big fan of what the West Coast was doing. But he
Mhm.
saw a threat. He saw him being, his livelihood being threatened by what they were able to do. Even what Pac was doing, he was very like, I think he admired it. Even them talking about that one scene in the documentary of like I get around being kind of like the blueprint for what they were trying to create with Biggie and even you
There's
know
the videos look the same when you go back. It's the I Get Around video, and
and
then is it Big
Juicy and
Papa,
they're the
Juicy?
same
I
thing.
was watching. I think they showed the clips in the documentary, and I go, "That is the same music video."
Hmm.
Like that
Hmm.
was crazy to look back on that in
You're
that
like,
way, because
man.
when you live through it, that's not the way you understood it. You understand the
Mhm.
West Coast being so diametrically opposed to the East Coast, different sounds and how we do music, and so it was really interesting to run the tape back. It was really interesting.
Well, I have one last question, and this one is a lot more upbeat.
Okay.
What I've been doing, I've probably been doing this podcast for 3 years now, and I've started to, ask folks at the very end, specifically folks who consume and produce media, like what
Mhm.
is bringing them joy in this moment, whether
Mhm.
it's a particular program, whether it's a particular creator, a song, an album, a book, a podcast, anything that sort of falls within the realm of the media landscape. What is something that, like, in this particular moment is bringing you joy?
Man, that is such a difficult question because I consume so much media and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm such a no, but I'm such a weirdo that I gravitate toward really dark stuff. Like my partner comments about this all the time because he's like, you watch horror movies, you are following all the true crime. Like I'd be like, what's the update on the David case? Like, like I'm always into some really dark stuff. But I will say that, I'm working on a book manuscript right now and
Mhm.
it's yeah, the title may change, but it starts off with the Black Mirror world, and it's trying to theorize, how Black folks are interacting with social media space, especially when we go into these corners of the internet where we're seeing Black history and culture weaponized and inverted to like mainstream conservative ideology,
Mhm.
anti-feminist, whatever. And
Mhm.
so, like, I'm talking a lot in there about negativity and how,
Mhm.
what the role the artificial amplification of the algorithms are playing in terms of like manipulating our conversations.
Yeah.
But it's been really cool as I finish these chapters to get to the interventions. And
Mhm.
the interventions chapter, I'm reading so many books that are thinking about how do we intervene on, negativity. And there's
Mhm.
some central themes that are keep coming up. It's like engaging with empathy and also with love. And
Mhm.
so like the Adrienne Marie Brown book, it was emergent strategy and things like that,
Mhm.
or just books about narrative and just books about. I've been just reading a lot of things, but I'll just say the Adrienne Marie Brown book, Emergent Strategy, has been one that's on my desk right now that I've been thinking about a lot. But I think in general, I will consume anybody give me any recommendation that is a book about how we can tap more into empathy and love. I'm reading it, because I'm
Mhm.
trying to figure out how I want to structure this chapter. So that's what
Right.
I'll go with. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, 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 it's cool. I think I've heard everything from colleague telling me that they secretly watch Country Wayne videos on YouTube to, a colleague telling me that she loves Cleo Soul's music and that's
Hmm.
sort of gotten her through certain seasons. I've had people talk about going back and revisiting television shows like A Different World and
Mm.
like forgetting how great they were because I guess sometimes we throw away kind of the baby with the bathwater, it's Cosby related. So it's like, oh, I haven't touched on that in a minute, but I look back on it and realize how dope it was. And I always find it interesting just to see, what people come back with, because often it sends me down a
Yeah.
different rabbit hole of kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So yeah, it's one of those things I like to ask at the end, because we're in such a heavy time
Yeah.
that sometimes we forget to kind
Mhm.
of bring back joy into focus. And then often in our work, we're talking about resilience, resistance, and
Mhm.
all these
Mhm.
things. But when it comes down to it, joy is an important concept to me, that I think if we were able to push it a little bit more, it may
Mhm.
it may get us to a different space than where we get when we center our resistance
Mhm.
button.
Yeah. And like I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but resistance and joy, like those things are interconnected. Like we
Yeah.
can only resist when we like, I don't know, we just have to have that spiritual protection around us. So we need
Mhm.
positivity, we need joy, we need to engage in
Mhm.
parties, we need to listen to music, we need to do something to keep our spirit up in order to continue on with the fight. And I think, we're so good at that. And that's why I don't want us to lose sight of this. Like
Mhm.
the conversations online, the fighting, the infighting, like y'all, that's a distraction. Like it's such
Yeah.
a distraction, and it's keeping us from loving and connecting and in a way that's a little scary to me. So I'm hoping when my book is done, it will have a positive intervention on somebody. I know nobody's reading books, but I'm also thinking about ways to kind of like
Mm.
bring that information into like the public space. Podcast, video essay, something. I gotta do
Yeah.
something else because I want the information to get to the folks.
That's real. It's not just about padding the CV. It's definitely about making sure that folks are actually um, gaining the knowledge.
Yeah,
Spending all this time working on it. I think that's one thing that is sort of a dilemma. And that harks back to the beginning of our conversation before the recording started, where people aren't reading the way that they used to. And so how do we then figure out how to meet the moment where it's at? I mean, still do the work of writing, but figure out ways to sort of be creative about getting the message out there. Because ultimately that's what we do it for, I would imagine.
yeah. I mean, that's what I do it for. I had a professor that talked about writing books as being like or writing journal articles as us throwing manuscripts over a fence because he was like, it's very slow, it's not getting anywhere but to each of us. And so I think about that
Mm,
analogy a lot. I don't know why, but it's
mm,
like just to remind myself that it's good that we're producing knowledge and talking to each other and having these conversations, but
mm,
what else are we going to do with that information? If it's just
mm.
us talking to each other, it's not doing much, but throwing a manuscript back and forth over a fence. Like, so yeah.
Well, I totally appreciate you. I thank you for your time. And I can't wait to read this manuscript that you're working on, because I'm one of these people who do read still.
Yes, yes. I'm getting there. We chugging along.
For sure, for sure. I mean, what they say is that it's a hustle, and everything is a hustle in its own way, but we navigate through it, and we see it through. And I'm happy to see that you're doing a lot better than you were in Champagne. No diss to my Illini, but you seem like you're in a much better space, and so I'm thankful and happy that's happening for you. And I
Yeah.
look forward to getting a chance to chop it up with you IRL. That's what my son says. Is that what
Yeah,
this
IRL,
is?
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's another episode, Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Dr. Jabari Evans. This is Brooklyn Gipson, Dr. Brooklyn Gipson. And I can't wait to get this episode out to y'all, but it will be on Substack tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Peace.